John adjusted his collar, glancing around the grand hall with its towering crystalline arches and shimmering, color-shifting walls. It was an otherworldly sight, like standing inside a living kaleidoscope. The Interstellar Council's welcome banquet was in full swing, filled with diplomats from every corner of the galaxy. Though most of the species were bipedal and vaguely humanoid, their diverse forms made for a truly alien crowd. It was his first assignment as Earth's representative, and he couldn't help but feel out of place. The formal cut of his tailored suit clashed with the flowing silks, glowing skins, and bioorganic exoskeletons of the beings around him. "John, you're standing there like a statue," said Ethan, one of his closest colleagues and fellow diplomats. Ethan, a seasoned negotiator, looked far more comfortable, his easy smile and casual posture a sharp contrast to John's tense stance. "I'm observing," John replied, his voice quieter than he intended. "Trying to get a feel for the room." "You mean you're trying to avoid mingling?" Ethan teased, clapping a hand on John's shoulder. "Come on, man, you're not going to learn anything just standing here. Let's find someone to talk to." Before John could protest, Ethan had already started scanning the crowd. John sighed, reluctantly following as his colleague wove through the throng of alien ambassadors. They stopped near a trio of Senea delegates. The Senea were known for their striking appearance, tall, graceful figures with skin that shimmered faintly like polished pearl. Their eyes, large and luminous, seemed to reflect every color at once, making them captivating and just a little intimidating. "Ambassador Lairani." Ethan greeted the nearest Senea, bowing slightly in their cultural tradition. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Ethan Clark, from Earth." Lairani turned, her gaze settling on John and Ethan. Her voice was smooth, almost musical. "Ah, the humans. I've been curious about your kind. I am Lairani, representative of the Senea delegation. A pleasure to meet you, Ethan. And you are?" John stepped forward, his awkwardness momentarily forgotten. "John Taylor." "It's an honor, Ambassador Lairani." Lairani inclined her head, her shimmering silver hair catching the light. "I understand Earth is new to the Council. This must be quite an experience for you." "It's definitely unlike anything I've encountered before," John admitted, managing a small smile. "I'm still getting used to everything." Ethan, ever the smooth operator, chimed in. "We're here to learn and contribute. And I've heard that the Senea are among the most experienced diplomats in the galaxy. Perhaps you can share some insights." Lairani's smile widened, revealing slightly pointed teeth that gave her an otherworldly elegance. "You flatter us, Ethan. But I suppose we do have our ways. The Senea believe in building understanding through direct connection. A shared experience can often bridge gaps that words cannot." "Direct connection?" John asked, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Lairani tilted her head, as if considering how to explain. "We often engage in cultural exchanges, inviting others to our ceremonies, our dances, even simple meals. The act of sharing something personal can create trust more quickly than negotiations over a table." "That sounds quite different from Earth's approach," John said, scratching his chin. "We're more used to formal protocols and written agreements." "Indeed," Lairani replied, her gaze lingering on John. "Perhaps we can change that. I would be honored to introduce you to some of our customs, if you're interested." Ethan nudged John with his elbow, grinning. "See? This is what I'm talking about. Building relationships, making connections." John felt a flicker of annoyance at Ethan's prodding, but he nodded politely. "I'd be happy to learn more, Ambassador." "Then consider yourself invited," Lairani said, her eyes twinkling. "We're holding a small gathering tomorrow evening. I trust you can both attend." Ethan nodded enthusiastically. "We'll be there. Looking forward to it." Lairani inclined her head once more before turning back to her fellow Senea, leaving John and Ethan to step away. Once they were out of earshot, John exhaled a long breath. "Well, that was something. She seems interested in you," Ethan remarked, a sly grin spreading across his face. "Don't start," John muttered. "I'm here to do my job, not what? Make friends? Build alliances?" Ethan interrupted. "Come on, John, this is how diplomacy works. You connect with people. And she seems like someone worth connecting with." John shot Ethan a sidelong glance. "You're reading too much into it. She's just being polite." "Sure," Ethan said, his grin widening. "Keep telling yourself that." The next evening, John found himself standing outside a building that resembled a glowing seashell, its surface rippling with soft, warm light. Inside, the atmosphere was unlike the formal banquet. There were no grand speeches or elaborate decorations, just a comfortable, welcoming space filled with cushions, low tables, and a gentle hum of conversation. Senea musicians played melodic instruments, their notes drifting like water through the air. Laurani greeted them with a warm smile. "John, Ethan, I'm glad you could make it. Please, come in." She led them to a group of Senea and a few other alien diplomats seated in a circle. The conversation was lighthearted, with everyone sharing stories of their worlds and cultures. John listened intently, taking in the unique perspectives and marveling at the similarities hidden beneath the surface. After a while, Laurani moved to sit beside John, her shimmering form catching his attention. "John, tell me, what was your first impression of the Interstellar Council?" John hesitated. "Overwhelming, honestly. I didn't know what to expect. Everything here is so different, so vast." Laurani's gaze softened. "It is vast, yes, but not so different as you might think. All of us, in our own ways, are seeking connection, understanding, and a place to belong." "That's a nice way of looking at it," John said, a small smile creeping onto his face. "It's easy to forget, with all the politics and posturing, that we're all just trying to find common ground." Laurani nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Exactly, and perhaps, if we remember that, we can accomplish more than we ever imagined." Ethan leaned over from John's other side. "See, John? This is what I was talking about. You're getting it." John rolled his eyes but couldn't help smiling. "I'm just trying to keep up." As the evening wore on, John began to feel more at ease. He shared a few stories of Earth, of its cities, its art, and its music. Laurani listened intently, her curiosity genuine. In return, she described her homeworld's flowing oceans of light and the Senea's ancient traditions of storytelling through touch and dance. When the gathering finally began to wind down, Laurani stood, extending a hand to John. "Thank you for coming tonight. I hope this won't be our last conversation." John shook her hand, surprised by the warmth in her smile. "I'd like that." As he and Ethan walked back to their quarters, Ethan gave John a playful nudge. "Well, still think you don't belong here?" John chuckled. "Maybe not as much as I thought." Chapter 2: Building Bridges. The days following the Senean gathering passed quickly. John and Ethan were soon absorbed in the Council's daily activities, debating trade routes, reviewing exploratory missions, and untangling disagreements between member civilizations. Though the work was demanding, John found himself thinking back to the quiet moments he'd shared with Laurani. Despite her outward elegance, there had been an underlying warmth, a hint of humor in her smiles that stuck with him. "You're zoning out again," Ethan remarked, snapping his fingers in front of John's face. They were walking together down one of the council's many long, crystalline corridors. "Just thinking," John replied. "Thinking about Laurani, maybe?" Ethan grinned. "I saw how you two were chatting. You seemed more relaxed than I've ever seen you." John shook his head. "She's an ambassador, Ethan. It's not like I can." "Who says you can't?" Ethan interrupted. "Look, I know you're all about keeping things professional, but sometimes diplomacy is as much about relationships as it is about treaties. A little trust goes a long way." John stopped, turning to face Ethan. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you spend some more time with her. Learn more about the Senea. Build that bridge." John frowned, his mind racing. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Ethan replied. "Trust me, the more we understand each other, the better we can work together. Besides, I have a feeling she's got plenty to teach you." The opportunity came sooner than John expected. Later that evening, a message from Laurani appeared on his personal tablet. "Ambassador Taylor, would you like to join me tomorrow for a tour of our cultural wing? I believe you might find it enlightening." He stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. Before he could overthink it, Ethan appeared in the doorway of their shared office. "What's got you all flustered?" Ethan asked, stepping inside and peering over John's shoulder. "Ah, an invitation. She's taking the first step. Lucky you." "Ethan," John said, half annoyed, "this isn't what you think. It's just a cultural exchange." "Sure," Ethan said with a wink. "Go ahead." Accept. This is good for everyone. The next morning, John met Laurani in the council's sprawling cultural wing. The space was a mosaic of alien artistry, living sculptures that shifted colors as you walked by, paintings made of light that changed depending on the viewer's perspective, and music that seemed to rise from the very floor itself. Laurani greeted him warmly, her silver hair catching the sunlight streaming through the high windows. Thank you for coming, John. I hope this will be an enjoyable experience. I'm looking forward to it, John replied, trying to sound confident despite the slight nervousness in his voice. They strolled through the exhibits, with Laurani explaining the history and symbolism behind the Seine pieces. One sculpture, a twisting, glowing structure that seemed to defy gravity, caught John's attention. This represents the harmony of opposites, Laurani explained. Our people believe that balance is achieved by embracing differences, not by erasing them. John nodded. I can see why that philosophy would resonate. It's beautiful. Laurani smiled at his response. And what about Earth's art? I've heard that humans create extraordinary music and literature. Perhaps you could tell me more about your people's cultural expressions. John hesitated for a moment, then said, well, we have a long tradition of storytelling. Books, films, even video games, each one is a way of sharing experiences and exploring what it means to be human. Fascinating, Laurani said. Perhaps one day you could share some of those stories with me. Sure, John said, his tone softening. I'd be happy to. The conversation flowed easily as they moved from one exhibit to the next. John found himself relaxing, drawn in by Laurani's genuine interest and the way she seemed to truly listen. She asked thoughtful questions about his life on Earth, his family, and what had led him to become a diplomat. In turn, John asked about her upbringing among the Seine, learning about their traditions, their love of music, and their belief in the power of shared experiences. At one point, they paused in front of a series of intricate tapestries. Each one depicted a moment from Seine history woven in threads that shimmered with changing colors. This one is particularly special to me, Laurani said, pointing to a tapestry that showed a group of Seine gathered around a glowing tree. It tells the story of how our people came together to survive a great calamity. It was a time of great division, but ultimately it was our willingness to connect with one another that saved us. John studied the tapestry, the intricate details catching his eye. It's incredible. The amount of work, the level of detail. I can't imagine how long it must have taken to create. Generations, Laurani replied. Each thread was placed by hand, passed down through families. It's a reminder that some things are worth taking time to build. John glanced at her, struck by the sincerity in her voice. I can see why you value shared experiences so much. Laurani looked at him, her eyes luminous. And I hope that, in time, you'll come to value them as well. By the end of the tour, John felt a subtle shift in his perspective. He'd come into the council expecting formality and politics, yet here was a culture that thrived on personal connection, on the little moments that brought people closer. Laurani's warmth and openness had begun to chip away at his guarded demeanor. As they left the cultural wing, Laurani turned to him. Thank you for joining me, John. It means a great deal. Thank you for inviting me, John said. I learned a lot today. Then it was time well spent, Laurani replied with a gentle smile. Perhaps we can do this again soon. John hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that. Later that evening, as John recounted the day's events to Ethan, his colleague couldn't help but grin. See? I told you. A little time, a little conversation, and you're starting to see the bigger picture. Maybe, John admitted, his tone thoughtful. But it's not just about understanding the Seine. It's about realizing there's more to diplomacy than treaties and speeches. Ethan leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. And that, my friend, is how you truly make a difference. John sat back, his mind replaying the day's conversations and Laurani's kind smile. For the first time, he began to feel that perhaps he was on the right path after all. Chapter 3, An Unforeseen Challenge. John's days at the Interstellar Council quickly settled into a steady rhythm. Meetings in the morning, diplomatic functions in the afternoon, and evenings often spent reviewing proposals or preparing for the next round of negotiations. Despite the endless stream of work, he found himself looking forward to those moments when he crossed paths with Laurani. Their casual conversations were a welcome break from the formality of the council chambers. One morning, as John and Ethan headed toward their usual briefing, they were met by a harried-looking assistant rushing down the corridor. Ambassador Taylor, the assistant called out. There's been a development regarding the joint humanitarian project. The colony on Veteran 9 is requesting immediate aid. John glanced at Ethan. Wasn't that supposed to be handled by the logistics team? They're overwhelmed, the assistant explained. There's been a surge of displaced settlers and the council is asking for additional representatives to oversee the distribution of resources. The Senate delegation has already agreed to send Lerani. They'd like you to join her. Ethan smirked. Looks like you've been volunteered. Guess I'll be holding down the fort while you're off on your little adventure. John sighed, adjusting his collar. All right, I'll head down to the briefing room. Lerani's already there. Yes, Ambassador. She's reviewing the initial reports, the assistant replied before hurrying off. When John entered the briefing room, he found Lerani standing before a large holo display that showed the surface of Veteran 9. The planet's dusty red landscape was dotted with settlements, some marked in green as safe zones, others flashing yellow or red to indicate areas of concern. Lerani turned as John approached, a faint smile crossing her face. John, I see they've recruited you for this mission, she said, gesturing for him to join her. I'm glad you're here. Happy to help, John replied, trying to match her calm demeanor. What's the situation? Lerani motioned to the display. The colony suffered a series of meteor impacts last month. Most of the settlements have recovered, but one region is still struggling. Infrastructure is unstable and the settlers are in urgent need of medical supplies, food, and shelter. We'll be coordinating the relief efforts on the ground. John nodded, studying the map. How much support do we have? Are there any local groups we can rely on? There are a few, Lerani said, tapping a spot on the map. The local council is cooperative, but their resources are stretched thin. The Senate and medical teams will handle the initial triage, while the humans have offered some portable shelters and engineers to help stabilize structures. So we're in charge of making sure everything runs smoothly, John concluded. Exactly, Lerani replied. It's a complex operation, but if we coordinate effectively, we can make a real difference. By the time they arrived on Veteran 9, the situation was as chaotic as the reports had suggested. The main settlement's landing area was crowded with shuttles unloading crates of supplies. Dust swirled in the hot, dry air as volunteers and medics rushed back and forth, setting up tents and portable clinics. John and Lerani wasted no time. They quickly met with the local leaders who provided a more detailed breakdown of the needs in each sector. While Lerani focused on organizing the medical teams, John took charge of the logistical side, ensuring that food and building materials were delivered to the correct zones. Despite the stressful environment, the two of them worked together seamlessly, exchanging updates and adjusting their plans as new challenges arose. At one point, as they reviewed the supply lists, Lerani paused and looked over at John. You're handling this well. I can see why they chose you for this assignment. John smiled faintly, scanning the data on his tablet. I'm just trying to keep everything moving. You're the one coordinating the medics and keeping everyone calm. Lerani chuckled. Diplomacy and relief work aren't so different. Both require patience, adaptability, and a willingness to work with what you have. That's one way to look at it, John said. It's good to have a partner who knows what they're doing. Lerani raised an eyebrow. A partner, HM? I'll take that as a compliment. As the day wore on, John and Lerani found themselves deep in one of the most damaged sectors. A series of temporary shelters had been set up, and the two ambassadors were inspecting the area, making note of any additional supplies needed. The settlers, humans, Senea, and other species were weary but hopeful, grateful for the help. John, Lerani said quietly as they walked through the rows of tents. It's moments like this that remind me why we do what we do. It's easy to get lost in the politics and the arguments, but here, you can see the impact. John glanced at her, her profile softened by the reddish light of the setting sun. I think I'm starting to understand that. Seeing the faces of these people, knowing we're helping them, it's grounding. Lerani nodded. Exactly. Diplomacy isn't just about negotiations and treaties. It's about ensuring that people can live their lives, no matter where they're from. That's what makes it all worthwhile. John hesitated before replying. You make it sound so straightforward. It's never straightforward, Lerani said with a small smile. But it's simple in principle. We help where we can, we learn from each other, and we build something better together. HFY desk, typing up a report while Lerani stood nearby, reading through the latest updates. Every so often, she would comment on a detail and John would adjust his notes. The quiet rhythm of their collaboration was oddly comforting even amidst the chaos. As they wrapped up their work for the night, Lerani glanced at John. You've done well today. I know this isn't the kind of assignment you're used to, but you handled it admirably. John leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms. Couldn't have done it without your guidance. You're the one keeping us all on track. We make a good team, Laurani said, her tone warm. John met her gaze, feeling a hint of pride in their shared accomplishment. We do. By the end of their first full day on Veteran 9, John felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. The settlers had food, shelter, and medical care. It was far from perfect, there were still shortages and the damaged infrastructure would take weeks to fully repair, but progress had been made. As he and Laurani stood outside the command center looking out at the sprawling settlement, Laurani turned to him. Thank you, John. For your work, your dedication. It's good to see someone who cares as much as you do. John looked at her, caught off guard by her sincerity. I could say the same about you. Laurani smiled, a hint of amusement in her expression. We'll see what tomorrow brings. As the stars began to emerge in the alien sky, John found himself strangely hopeful about the days ahead. Chapter 4, The Breaking Point. 2 weeks on Veteran 9 blurred into long, demanding days. John and Laurani worked tirelessly to stabilize the colony, organizing relief efforts, meeting with local leaders, and negotiating with council representatives for additional resources. They had developed an efficient rhythm, each knowing when to step back and let the other take charge. The collaboration brought them closer, though John remained mindful of maintaining a professional boundary. Despite their progress, the work began to take a toll. Tempers flared among the settlers as shortages persisted and the strain of constant decision-making left John and Laurani increasingly fatigued. It wasn't long before they faced their first major disagreement. I'm telling you, we need to prioritize the northern sector, John said, gesturing at the map projected on the table in the command tent. They've gone without adequate food supplies for days. And I'm saying the southern zone is at greater risk, Laurani replied, her voice calm but firm. They have more families with young children and limited medical care. If we don't send help now, the situation will deteriorate quickly. John rubbed his temples, trying to keep his frustration in check. We've been running on emergency protocols for too long. We need to establish a sustainable supply line, not just patch up the most critical areas every other day. And how do you propose we do that without ensuring the immediate survival of the most vulnerable? Laurani countered. We can't think long-term until we address the present crisis. Ethan, who had recently arrived to provide additional support, cleared his throat. Maybe we can come up with a compromise. What if we split the resources between both sectors? John shot him a glance. It's not that simple. We don't have enough supplies to cover both needs right now. We have to choose. Laurani looked at John, her expression softening. John, I understand your point, but we're dealing with lives here. If we don't act swiftly, people will suffer. I know that, John interrupted, his tone sharper than intended. I just think we need to step back and look at the bigger picture. If we keep reacting instead of planning, we'll never get ahead. There was a moment of silence, the tension hanging in the air. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing he hadn't spoken up. Finally, Laurani sighed. All right, let's look at the data again. Maybe there's a way to stretch what we have and address both sectors without compromising too much. John exhaled, his shoulders relaxing. Okay, let's figure this out together. Over the next few hours, they worked side by side, analyzing reports and recalculating supply distributions. Ethan joined in, suggesting logistical adjustments based on his experience with similar operations on Earth. Slowly, they pieced together a revised plan that would provide emergency aid to the southern zone while starting to establish a steady supply line to the northern sector. See? We can make it work, Ethan said with a satisfied nod as they finalized the details. Laurani glanced at John, a faint smile on her lips. You were right to push for a broader solution. I can be a bit focused at times. And I can be a bit stubborn, John admitted. But we got there in the end. Ethan rolled his eyes. You two and your diplomatic sparring. I swear, if I weren't here to keep things on track. John chuckled. You're just here for the glory, Ethan. Absolutely, Ethan said with a grin. And I'm not leaving until I get a commendation. The tension from earlier began to dissolve, replaced by a renewed sense of camaraderie. Later that evening, after the revised plan had been put into action, John and Laurani took a moment to breathe. They stood at the edge of the settlement, watching the distant lights of the supply convoy making its way toward the northern sector. The air was cooler now, and a faint breeze carried the scent of dry vegetation. I didn't mean to be so harsh earlier, John said after a long silence. I know you're trying to do what's best. Laurani glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. And I didn't mean to be so insistent. I care deeply about these people. I know you do too. John nodded. It's hard not to. You see what they're going through and you just want to help. That's why we're here, Lairani said. Even if we don't always agree on how to do it. John smiled faintly. Maybe that's a good thing. Keeps us from getting too comfortable. Lairani chuckled. Perhaps you're right. A little disagreement can lead to better solutions. They stood there for a while, the silence between them comfortable now. The stars above Veteran 9 were bright, unclouded by pollution, and the vast expanse of the galaxy seemed to stretch infinitely in every direction. John, Lairani said softly, I've learned a lot from you these past weeks. More than I expected. John looked at her, surprised by the admission. I've learned from you too. It's not often you meet someone who can make you rethink your approach to, well, everything. Lairani smiled, and for a moment, the weight of their responsibilities seemed to lift. Chapter 5, Building Trust. When the relief effort on Veteran 9 finally stabilized, John and Lairani found themselves returning to the Interstellar Council headquarters with a sense of accomplishment and a fair share of exhaustion. Their combined efforts had helped the colony regain its footing, and while there was still much work to be done, the settlers were no longer on the brink of collapse. For John, it was his first real taste of what interstellar diplomacy could achieve beyond the negotiating table. For Lairani, it was another reminder of the value in working with someone who saw things differently. You know, John said one evening as they sat in the council's gardens, a peaceful reprieve from the chaos they had just left behind, I didn't expect this assignment to be so hands-on. Lairani smiled, her luminous eyes reflecting the soft glow of the garden's bioluminescent plants. Diplomacy isn't always about treaties and trade deals. Sometimes it's about rolling up your sleeves and doing what needs to be done. I get that now, John replied. And I have to admit I learned a lot from you. About your people, your culture, and your approach to challenges. You surprised me as well, Lairani admitted. When we first met, I wasn't sure what to make of you. You seemed so reserved, so focused on procedure. John chuckled. I probably came off as stiff and inflexible. You did, she said, her teasing tone light. But that changed. You proved you could adapt and see things from another perspective. I respect that. John considered her words, then looked around at the garden's serene beauty. I think working with you taught me the importance of trust. Not just in others, but in myself. I was so concerned about doing everything by the book, I forgot to listen to my instincts. Lairani reached out, her hand brushing his briefly. You have good instincts, John. And it's clear you care deeply about the people you're helping. He glanced at her hand, then back at her face. Her expression was open, warm. Thanks, Lairani. That means a lot. As the weeks passed, John and Lairani continued to collaborate on various council projects. Their partnership became more natural, their conversations more personal. John found himself looking forward to their late-night strategy sessions and the quiet moments when they shared stories from their respective worlds. One afternoon, after wrapping up a particularly complicated logistics meeting, Lairani suggested they take a break and explore a nearby market. It was located in one of the council's civilian sectors, a sprawling plaza filled with merchants and artisans from countless species. The air was alive with the scent of alien spices, the hum of unfamiliar instruments, and the vibrant colors of goods displayed under glittering canopies. Have you been here before? John asked as they wandered through the bustling marketplace. Once or twice, Lairani replied. It's always changing. New merchants arrive, new goods appear. It's a place where you can get a sense of how different civilizations interact on a more personal level. John paused at a stall selling intricately carved ornaments. The alien merchant, a short, stocky creature with multiple arms, eagerly showed off his wares. John picked up a small figurine, its surface etched with tiny, swirling patterns that seemed to shift as he turned it in the light. It's beautiful, he said, holding it up for Lairani to see. Do you have anything like this on your homeworld? Lairani examined the figurine, then smiled. Not quite. Senian art is more fluid, less detailed. But I can see the appeal. It's as if the patterns tell a story. John handed the figurine back to the merchant, who looked slightly disappointed but gave him a polite nod. It's amazing how much you can learn about a culture just by looking at what they create. Exactly, Lairani said. Art, music, food, these are the threads that connect us even when words fail. They continued through the market, stopping occasionally to admire a piece of jewelry, a musical instrument, or a vibrant tapestry. With each step, John felt more at ease. The structured environment of the council chambers had always been where he felt most comfortable, but here, in the midst of this lively, colorful chaos, he found a new kind of understanding. And walking beside Lairani, he felt a sense of companionship that he hadn't realized he was missing. Later, as they sat at a small cafe overlooking the plaza, sipping drinks that shimmered faintly in the sunlight, John turned to Lairani. I don't think I ever asked, what made you become a diplomat? Laurani swirled her drink thoughtfully. It wasn't something I planned. I come from a family of artists, not politicians. But as I traveled and met people from other worlds, I realized I had a talent for bringing people together, for finding common ground. It felt right? John nodded. That makes sense. You have a way of making people feel heard. It's a rare quality. And what about you? Laurani asked, tilting her head. What brought you to diplomacy? John hesitated, then shrugged. I've always been drawn to the idea of solving problems. Growing up, I watched my parents, both teachers, help their students navigate tough situations. I guess it made me want to help people too, just on a larger scale. Laurani smiled. It's a noble calling. John laughed softly. Noble? Maybe. But mostly it's just trying to do the right thing. That's what makes it noble, she said, her voice gentle. Caring enough to try. John met her gaze, and for a moment the bustling market faded away. All he saw was her quiet confidence, her genuine curiosity, her unwavering dedication. He was struck by how easy it had become to talk to her, to trust her. When they finally returned to the council headquarters, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. The work ahead would be challenging, but he knew he could face it with Laurani at his side. Together, they had learned to navigate the complexities of interstellar diplomacy, not just as colleagues, but as partners who understood and respected each other's strengths. That evening, as they reviewed the next day's agenda, John glanced at Laurani and said, I'm glad we've had these chances to work together. I've learned so much, not just about the council, but about myself. Laurani looked up from her datapad, her expression thoughtful. The same is true for me. I didn't expect to find someone who could challenge me and inspire me at the same time. John smiled. I guess we make a good team. Laurani returned the smile, and in that moment, John realized just how much he valued their connection. Chapter 6, A New Beginning. John stepped out onto the council balcony, the faint hum of distant spacecraft blending with the gentle breeze that carried a subtle hint of alien flowers. The day had been long, another round of delicate negotiations, more debates over resource allocations, and hours spent balancing the conflicting demands of the council's diverse members. Yet, despite the fatigue, John felt something else, a quiet sense of accomplishment. He looked over the railing, watching the soft glow of city lights spread out like a constellation. The sprawling council complex, with its shimmering glass towers and intricate bridges, was a far cry from anything on Earth. Still, after months spent navigating its labyrinthine halls, it had started to feel familiar. Perhaps even comfortable. You always come up here after a long day. John turned to see Laurani approaching, her graceful silhouette illuminated by the glow of the city. She wore the flowing garments typical of her people, their fabric catching the light like water reflecting the sun. Her smile was warm, a welcome contrast to the day's formalities. It's quiet, John said simply. A good place to think. Laurani joined him at the railing. And what are you thinking about tonight? He hesitated, then chuckled softly. How far we've come. When I first arrived, I didn't think I'd last more than a few weeks. Now it feels like I'm part of something bigger. Laurani tilted her head, her silver hair catching the light. You are. And you've made a difference. Not just in the council, but in how we work together. I've learned so much from you. Funny, John said, glancing at her. I was just thinking the same about you. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, the city's lights flickering in the distance. Laurani finally broke the stillness. Do you remember our first meeting? John smirked. You mean when I awkwardly tried to make conversation and you probably thought I was hopeless? She laughed softly. I thought you were guarded, but also curious. I could see you were trying, even if you weren't quite sure how. And now, he asked, turning to face her more fully. Now, I see someone who's grown, Laurani said, her voice gentle. Someone who's learned to trust himself and others. Someone who's made this place better just by being here. John felt his cheeks flush slightly. I don't know about all that. I'm just doing my job. You're doing more than that, Laurani insisted. You've shown that even when we come from different worlds, we can find common ground. That's not just a skill, it's a gift. He looked down, trying to absorb her words. Well, if I've learned anything, it's because of the people I've worked with. People like you. Her smile deepened and she reached out, placing a hand gently on his arm. John, you don't give yourself enough credit. He met her gaze, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. The sounds of the city faded, and all he could see was her, the warmth in her expression, the quiet strength in her eyes. Their partnership had grown over time, strengthened not just by the challenges they faced, but by the moments in between. The late-night conversations, the shared laughter, the times they leaned on each other when the pressure threatened to overwhelm them. They had become more than colleagues, more than friends. Yet neither had fully acknowledged it until now. Laurani, John said after a long pause, I don't think I ever thanked you. She arched an elegant brow. For what? For being patient with me, he said. For helping me see that diplomacy isn't just about rules and protocols. It's about people. About understanding and connection. I didn't really get that before. She nodded slowly. And I thank you for reminding me that sometimes a little structure, a little focus, can be just as important. We've both learned from each other. True, John said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. But I think I've learned more. Laurani tilted her head, studying him. It's not a contest, John. He laughed softly. I know. But still. I owe you more than I can say. Her hand lingered on his arm, and when he looked down, he realized just how close they were. You don't owe me anything, Laurani said quietly. We've both given something. That's what makes this work. As the night deepened, they continued talking, their conversation shifting from council matters to more personal topics. Laurani told him stories of her homeworld, the endless oceans of light that stretched across its surface, the songs her people sang to mark the passage of time. John, in turn, shared tales of his childhood on Earth, how he used to sit by the coast, watching the waves crash against the shore, dreaming of exploring the stars. There's something universal about the ocean, Laurani said thoughtfully. No matter where you're from, it has a way of making you feel connected to something greater. Yeah, John agreed. It's like it reminds you how small you are, but also how much there is to discover. Laurani leaned against the railing, looking out at the city. I think that's what draws me to this work. The discovery. The chance to see things from a new perspective, to connect with people I never would have met otherwise. John nodded. Same here. It's not always easy, but it's worth it. She turned back to him, her gaze steady. And would you say the same about us? John hesitated, caught off guard by the directness of her question. I think we've come a long way. And I value what we've built together. Her expression softened. So do I. More than you know. John felt a warmth spread through his chest. Laurani, She placed a hand gently on his, stopping him. You don't have to say anything. I understand. Let's just appreciate this moment. He nodded, grateful for her understanding. They stood there in silence once more, the city's lights casting a soft glow around them. For the first time in a long time, John felt truly at peace.